Hello everybody, how's it going today? Goldplasma231 here, back in data about Kagurabachi, chapter number 85. This chapter is titled Open. And for once, Kagurabachi, I'll give it to you, you've got a pretty good chapter title, because this chapter is all about Samura finally opening up that door to Iori's room and his younger version of himself, or more of like the way his mind rationalizes how he views both Chihiro and Iori and the past and the burden of the past, really, in specific. And it's about him opening up that door and finally becoming willing to open up his eyes. Of course, is the big crux that happens at the end of this chapter. I'm sorry for spoiling it for you. My bad. And well, if you didn't know the big twist at the end of this chapter by the point of watching this video, then, well, I am sort of sorry but not sorry, because, like, you should be going into a video review of Kagurabachi chapter number 85 and sort of be expecting, like, hey, you may get spoiled on some things. And also, I'll just go and say now, I think I'll probably be spoiling a few events that happen in a few other manga, mainly Chainsaw Man in this video, mainly for two reasons, being that I reread, like, 7 volumes of the series yesterday at the recording of this video, and also because I think there's a fight in that series that I really want to relate back to this fight in Kagurabachi chapter number 85. And before somebody says, like, oh, but Chainsaw Man is just bad and Kagurabachi is much better. Yes, I think there are some points in Chainsaw Man that are not as good as Kagurabachi. Kagurabachi has had a very good run so far, and hell, the original manga of Chainsaw Man ran for 97 chapters before part 2 came out, and we are getting shockingly close to that in Kagurabachi. It's honestly just putting it into perspective that this series has almost been jumped for 2 years, which it's just really weird to try to wrap my head around that fact. But either way, we have a really good chapter of Kagurabachi to talk about today. And I mean, yeah, I just want to go and get into this chapter and just talk about it, because there is just a lot of very interesting perspectives shifting back and forth, and a lot of big events that sort of I feel are they're shown off very well, but they're sort of undermined by the other emotional events happening in this chapter. We'll be getting to all of that in due time, but of course, before we can talk about chapter number 85 of Kagurabachi, we first need to talk about what happened last time in chapter number 84 of Kagurabachi. And hey, it was Inten versus Tobimune, like the part, 3 of this fight, as far as like the sequential manga chapters ago. Chihiro and Samura were facing off. Chihiro had just pretty much unlocked his Aka Suzaku and Aka Crow powers going around, using, of course, the copying ability of Inten to go around like, hey, I'm copying Crow, I can now duplicate myself around, not duplicate, but like transport myself around into all of the locations like Samura has been doing this entire time. And the very end of last chapter was Chihiro just pretty much being like, hey Samura, let me help you out. Inten has the power to destroy the Shinichi, and I will show you how that works. And that is where we ended off last chapter of Kagurabachi, is on that moment of Chihiro going through, swinging Inten after 2 EI White Purity styles are coming out. Both Inten and Tobimune hit into each other, and of course, part of Tobimune's blade starts to crack. A small chip is formed as a larger crack starts to ring its way open. And this chapter of Kagurabachi just goes back to remind us of some of the events that we saw transpiring in chapter number 73 of Kagurabachi. As we open up this chapter on that whole idea of Iori sobbing and crying in her room. And of course, this is when she was much younger, about that like 9 to 10 years old sort of stage. Like she'd been living with Samura for about a few months or so, and this was before she went to go live with her aunt, which is of course where we know that she was living whenever she got properly introduced into the story of Kagurabachi, right? It's just that idea of Samura standing at the door, not willing to open it up because you just can't bear the burden of what's happening inside. And of course, this is where we get the whole chapter of the title. Chapter number 85, Open. Man, I wonder what door this chapter is talking about being opened. I really wonder, right? But then we get the whole moment of, yes, there's a chip that's formed in Tobimune, and the blade looks like it could crack here with a few more sword strings, right? And the beginning of this chapter is Chihiro being like, hey, look at that, it cracked, like, this proves it. And he's like, hey, Samura, I will destroy the Shinichi with this power. So, and he's like, hey, help me out here, like, I'm trying to tell you what's going on here. Of course, Iori and Ikura also entered the main area where this battle between Chihiro and Samura. The Masumi are also here too. They were a bigger part of last chapter. I just forgot to mention it earlier. But of course, Iori and Ikura are also here. And Iori sort of just standing here and yells out like, hey, father, eye, but before she can really go in and get a word over Samura, Samura just declares Suzaku and uses the power of the blade to, well, fix the blade. As the crack just repairs in a very simple instant, right? Honestly, I didn't even think that, like, Samura would be able to do this. I guess it was one of those things where I thought that maybe Samura's power only worked on external objects besides the blade, but it also makes sense being like it is the blade's inherent power. He can do that with it, right? Makes a whole lot of sense. I honestly didn't see too many people online saying, oh man, I wonder if Samura can do this, but I'm pretty sure there were some people out there who are like, man, what if he just, like, repairs Tobimune or whatever, right? But Chihiro sees this like, oh damn it, like, he has healed the blade, right? As we see Samura then declare the words of Crow, man, he's already got 2 of his powers out of the way this chapter, and on 1 page nonetheless, right? Pretty much, there's a bunch of crow feathers that start emulating from Tobimune and just the general area around Samura's body. As it almost starts to look like it's forming those wings, at least that's what I thought whenever I first read this chapter, as all of the crow feathers are scattering about, right? As we see it, they just, like, keep on multiplying, and multiplying more, right? And almost start to form a massive dome around where both Chihiro and Samura are. And of course, Ro, who is in the background, is looking at all this. He's like, oh my gosh, like a mass of feathers sprouting out. Like, man, like, wait a second. As all of the feathers start to envelop around him and a lot of the general area within this courtyard where this battle is currently going on. And Ro's like, damn it, like, hey, we can't see anything. Of course, nullifying the power that the Masumi have over Samura here in the moment, right? And Chihiro sort of gets a good look at what Samura's doing and realizes that this, to an effect, is the same tactic that he employed whenever he was fighting Hirohiko in the stage play theater, right? It's just things like, hey, he fixed a crack in the blade, but he won't open his own eyes. He'd rather pretend not to see the path to live. As you also see that Iori here in a moment is getting swallowed up by this mass of feathers. As Chihiro just says, like, hey, Kuro, and we see a bunch of his goldfish start to multiply from his area, and all the goldfish and the crows sort of mingle around with each other to create this massive dark dome. As it's at this point where we get some narration about all of the events that are truly going on here, just saying like, hey, just like Samura, Chihiro uses his spirit energy to flood the space around him. The air is dark with a mixture of feathers and goldfish. It's just honestly really fun, just like, yeah, we're mixing these two together here, right? But either way, only the 2 of them can detect their surroundings through their own spirit energy, right? Makes perfect sense, right? As we then go to pages number 4 and 5 of the chapter, we get a set of really awesome panels. As the narrator just continues saying, just the 2 of them. Currently, Chihiro can use Akka to wield Crow. This field flooded with spirit energy is their arena. They can both use Crow to teleport anywhere within its bounds. As we now see that Chihiro is standing here and Samura is standing on the opposing side. And of course, both of their eyes are closed because in reality, of course, this manga is in black and white, and without making it completely unreadable, we can't have the whole screen just like drenched in the blackness of just like the general idea, you know what I'm saying? Of like, yes, everything's dark. So we see everything in like the lightest version it sort of can be drawn in. But of course, these 2 have their eyes closed and are just sensing their surroundings with, of course, their respective feathers and goldfish, right? And we see they're both sheathing up their swords and getting ready to pour some kata in to use the EI white purity style, right? Well, at this point, Chihiro just speaks up and says like, hey, Samura, I will prove it to you as many times as I have to. Mr. Samura, you aren't getting rid of me. And we get a little bit of focus on Chihiro's hand. Of course, his left hand is super bloodied and beaten up right now. And because Chihiro is left-handed swinging a sword, he's got the Inten gripped in it, and just all of the blood from all of the damage that Samura's attacked in last chapter is still affecting Chihiro, right? And Samura just thinks back to whenever Chihiro's saying, like, hey, we don't care how badly we get hurt, pretty much. Like, we are going to make sure that you see this whole idea. And Samura also remembers Iori crying through that door, and that he needs to open up that door, right? And again, there's this idea of, like, Samura saying, okay, no, there is no way that that's okay for you to do, pretty much, right? As we see the 2 of them using the EI White Purity style, fighting with all of their swords. It's honestly a pretty cool dynamic panel that we get here on page number 7, as we see, like, they're both holding their scabbards at, like, each other's throat almost, and their boys are just, like, dancing in the sky. Honestly, Chihiro's pose here really reminds me of whenever Iori awakened in, like, chapter number 70 and how that was all portrayed back then. It's honestly really cool to see, right? Well, either way, Sombra just says, like, hey, Chihiro, you're already covered in wounds, like, hey, even if you're determined, and even if you have that type of power, it's agonizing, isn't it? Gripping the Intin. As long as you go on wielding the sword, that pain will always be there. The enchanted blades and I are relics of the past that should be put behind you. And he's like, enough, let go of it. You two don't need to be tormented by the past. As we get a lot of interesting shots in this montage, we see, of course, to the stage play whenever Chihiro was going through and fighting with Hirohiko, whenever he was going through cutting all of his arms off, and the whole idea of, like, all of the people in the theater were running away scared of the person that Chihiro was. That even if Chihiro had that power, it's antagonizing. It makes him out to be less of a person to others whenever he is gripping the Intin. And of course, Sombra remembers his own daughter here in a moment of, like, hey, you two don't need to be tormented by the past, as we just look at Iori wiping down the Sombra family manor of all of those scribbles of die and all of those other words ripped on it pretty much, right? And we just get a panel that pretty much fades to black, as we see that Sombra just comes through and puts a massive slash into Chihiro. As we see here in the moment, this bubble of all of the crows and all of the goldfish, or all the crow feathers into goldfish, sort of dissipates out in the moment, as we see that Iori is still looking front and center in this whole endeavor, pretty much, right? And as this is happening, we see that she suddenly turns around, throws the sword that she had in her hand over to Ikora, and Ikora grabs, he's like, hey, Iori, like, what are you doing? Like, where are you going? You're not running towards, like, the two murderers who are fighting each other, right? But either way, we just see Iori running towards this confrontation. As Chihiro is laying on the ground, he's got a massive slash in pretty much his torso chest area, and the Intin has fallen out of Chihiro's hand. As Sombra, in that typical way, is descending from the sky, getting ready to land on just one foot very softly on the ground. And Sombra's just like, hey, Chihiro, only I have to disappear along with the past. As Chihiro's just laying on the ground, not doing very good, he's thinking like, hey, I'm going to be a swordsmith, right? As Sombra just gets closer, is like, he gets on the ground and walks over to the Intin and starts to pick it up, as Chihiro just puts a hand barely onto the sword, right? And Sombra just says, like, from now on, you just live your own life. Of course, not burdened by any of the enchanted blades, the Rokuhira name, or any of these bigger threats going on in the world. As we look behind Sombra, we see a lone goldfish swimming towards his backside. And of course, Chihiro uses the Akka power of Crow, teleports behind Sombra with the Intin grasped in his hand. And we see Sombra just turn around, sensing Chihiro behind him. And we get a look of Chihiro and his father Kunishige in the Goldfish Bowl, as Chihiro grips the sword with his bloodied hand once more, and he just thinks to himself like, hey, I already am. Of course, I sort of read this in two ways, of the whole idea of, like, I am going to be a swordsmith, and Chihiro being like, I already am, I helped forge this Intin, and also the whole idea of Sombra saying, like, hey, live your own life from now on, Chihiro being like, hey, I already am living that life at the end of the day. He's like, hey, all I'm doing is living the best I can. And we see Sombra sort of taken aback by this a little bit, is like, he's hearing Chihiro say all these things, and we then cut to Iori running around the battlefield a little bit more. And she thinks about all of this various stuff, and, like, going through, wiping everything off the walls, her crying and all of this, right? And here in the moment, Chihiro is just saying, like, hey, I'm living the best I can, and it's because I have a past that I'd rather die than forget. As he's thinking like, hey, I can fight with you. As we see that Iori is really thinking a lot of these same things of like, hey, I want to be just like you so I can protect everyone too, Dad. Going around, the two of them hanging out together, because of course, she has a past that she would rather die than forget. Also, she runs around thinking like, hey, I can fight with you two. As Chihiro is still narrating this scene pretty much, but it's something that both Iori and Chihiro have in common with each other. The whole idea of like, hey, there's nothing that I want to throw away. Even if it hurts, I'll trample over all of it and keep moving forward, no matter how long it takes. As Chihiro and Samura are getting ready once more, EI White Fury style hands on both blades, and Chihiro is into it this time, but we see Samura is sort of wavering here in the moment, like he doesn't have his hand on the blade charging up all of the energy, right? As we see Iori start to run into the center of this battle between the two of them, right? And as this is happening, we see that Samura sort of senses that Iori is there in front of him, and we see that Iori's just like, hey. But then Samura starts to interpret this as Inori, of course, his previous old wife before she passed away. Oh no, not do oh good, right? And of course, Iori's mother, right? And the whole idea is Inori just being like, hey Samura, when are you going to let go of the past and look towards the future? And Samura's like, yeah, I know, like I already tried that, but in a future where I exist, Iori. But Inori just is like, no, Samura, I'm counting on you. I'm counting on you to look after her. As we see that Samura goes through here in the moment, goes and finally decides to open that door. As we see that he walks into Iori's room and just is like, hey Iori, thank you for protecting me. Goes, pulls his daughter out of bed and just gives her a hug here in the moment, right? And in this moment, we just look back at the battle happening before us. And Samura, the flames of Suzaku are emanating off of Samura's head. As we see that Iori is standing there, looking at Samura. And we see Samura has used Suzaku to heal his eyes. The scars start to fade away. As Samura, just looking forward, gets a good look at his own daughter, Iori. And he just proclaims, wow, you've really grown up. And that's where we end chapter number 85 of Kagurabachi. So yeah, this is going to be the third time I've recorded this section on my final thoughts. Normally, I am a one-take wonder kind of guy whenever it comes to this. Like, I sit down, I give my thoughts on the chapter, I do all my review on it, and I get the video edited, and I get it uploaded. But I don't know. I will go and say this right now. This is a good chapter of Kagurabachi. Don't get me wrong, there's a lot of really awesome moments that come in here just to make it work, but I don't know if I'm just losing my love for this series, or I really don't know what it is, but like, this is a good moment. I really do enjoy it, but I just didn't think this chapter was amazing standalone like it is, right? And whenever I look at these chapters of Kagurabachi, I try to look at it as the individual product we are given in a singular week. Of course, this time we get the 85th chapter of the series. And earlier in the video, I made a reference to Chainsaw Man at the very beginning and how there could be potential spoilers. And the way that I was talking about that in the first section of this final thoughts that I did was about the whole idea of the Aki versus Denji fight towards the later portion of part 1 of that series. And how whenever I read those chapters in the moment, I was not a weekly manga reader back then. I read all of the first part of Chainsaw Man all in one fell swoop, and one of the reasons that I think I like that battle so much, just looking at it, is because I was able to read all of the effects that happened in one singular moment. I was able to go from one thing, read all of the chapters, to the next one to read all of those, right? And I think that does wonders for a manga series. I mean, I also look at that whole idea of One Piece as a manga in general. Week to week, yeah, it's good. It's fine. But it's whenever you sit down and look at it on the bigger scale and, like, reread a whole section of the series, like Fishman Island. I've heard a lot of people say that that saga in One Piece, or that arc, was terrible week to week. And in the manga, it's not that much better, I'm going to say, but everything reads a whole lot better when you read it in the intended form of binging it sort of all at once, right? And I look to other manga like Fire Force. The Arthur versus Dragon fight in the very end of that series is my favorite battle in animated manga in all time. I just think it's absolutely amazing. And sitting down here, I am really struggling to come up with a battle that I've read week to week in Shonen Jump, Weekly Shonen Magazine, or any of these other shonen action. We can throw seinen in there too, even though I have not read much seinen stuff week to week besides for like stuff that runs in Young Jump, but even still I'm not really there on action series. And I'm really having trouble sitting down and thinking of a battle that I've read week to week that also doesn't have recency bias. Of course, there's a series called Ichi the Witch that is currently running in Shonen Jump, and we just finished up a massive arc involving the kingdom of Kagami, Bakugami, and an antagonist magic called the Joyous Sorrows magic. And that battle was really, really good, the final part of that. But I don't know if that is just me sitting down here and looking at, like, the rose-tinted glasses or rose-colored glasses, or however you're supposed to say that term, of just looking at it. And I feel the same with this chapter of Kagurabachi, and this whole idea of this chapter on its own, I think, really has a lot of awesome ideas. I love this whole idea of all the goldfish swimming around with all the crow feathers, and making this silent bubble, or like this sensory deprivative bubble for most people besides for Chihiro and Samura, who are using their spirit energy as like these feelers out in the wind to go through and attack each other. I think that's just a really cinematic moment that we see. We go through, we see Chihiro blocking all of these blades, until eventually in this later half of the chapter, it really moves into more of this emotional support inside of it, that eventually has this really nice payoff of Inori appearing instead of Iori in Samura's mind, going through Samura, opening up that door and opening up his eyes for the final time. But it's just one of these things where, whenever I first read this chapter, I just was like, oh, that's cool. Wow, Samura has his eyes open. Neat. But not like, oh my gosh, that's crazy insane. And whenever I had all of those feelings during a lot of the other portions of Kagurabachi, especially reading it during the Rakuzachi arc, I really don't know how I'm feeling with Kagurabachi right now. I really enjoyed this series, but it's just one of those things where I don't know how to properly talk about these thoughts on this chapter of the manga, when I just know it's going to be much better in the future reading it all in one fell swoop. Alright, this is recording number 4. This is the final one I am doing. I said I wasn't going to do another one, but I feel like I sort of need to now. And I think I need to put a level to this on. I sort of feel this way about reading Kagurabachi in this way, because of all of the reactions I see other people having on it. And I think it's just something where I'm sitting down here and being like, oh man, I feel like I need to enjoy this chapter of Kagurabachi like everybody else is, sitting down being like, oh my gosh, Samura's opened his eyes, and not sort of sitting there reading it being like, oh cool, and sitting down getting ready to record a video on it. Like, I remember having those moments in the Rakuzachi, whenever Hakuri drops the bombs on the arena and being like, oh my gosh, that's insane, and having a lot of really cool moments like it did whenever Aruha came back a few chapters ago, dropping my fork on my plate when I'm like, I can't believe it, he's back. And for some reason, I don't know why, it's just, this whole Samura versus Chihiro conflict just hasn't activated that part of my brain for whatever reason, and I feel like that's one of the reasons why I'm sort of not having the reaction I'm sort of wanting to with that. It's just like, I see everybody else having these amazing reactions of all of the things happening, and me, myself, and I just not having those and feeling like I'm a fake fan for some reason. I don't know. The end of this Kagurabachi, the final thoughts, has gone on for way too long. Good chapter, good moments. I wish we would have seen more of the bubble with both Chihiro and Inten, and who knows, maybe we'll see every Enchanted Blade have their sort of like dark domain thing, as we see like Kumeyori use all of the geishas to like duplicate themselves, and like maybe we used to play like Build a Dome or something, and then like, where are the other Enchanted Blades you know of? Oh yeah, the Shinuchi. Maybe it just like, I mean, the malediction's strong enough, so I don't know what we're talking about. Maybe it like uses bugs and like a bunch of mosquitoes form like a big black barrier where everybody can teleport around in, but either way, I just need to add that final thought as I was sort of sitting down, getting food, getting ready to edit this video. I'm like, I feel like I need to add this in because I don't think I properly said it in that final section of the video. I don't know. I'm rambling at this point. This video is probably going to be like 30 minutes once I cut in and splice all of these parts, but yeah, Kagurabachi, am I right? Alright, I will, back to wherever I splice this in, or maybe I don't really know at this point. And that's really the best final thoughts I can give on this chapter of Kagurabachi. Like I said, I've recorded this section 2 times already and don't feel like having to come back for a 4th by any means whatsoever, but was it a good chapter? Yes. Did I enjoy it? Yes. Did it have cool moments? It sure did, but just something about it I'm just not into right now. I just really don't know what that is and really what my problem is, because I know most people don't have this problem. It's just a cool manga, sort of is what it is there, but yeah, thanks guys for watching this video. There'll be a post link down in the description box for all the Kagurabachi videos, and yeah, I'll catch you guys next time for Kagurabachi chapter number 86, and honestly, I have no prediction for what's going to happen next, so I'll just catch you guys then. This will be Goldplasma 231, filming this for the 3rd time, signing out.